Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're watching. The channel's called Ratchet. My name's Andrew, and on this episode, I start chopping up the rear arches. Run the title. Welcome to the channel if you're new. If you're not, welcome back. As usual, all of the standard. Subscribe if you like this video. Up there is a link to the playlist of all of the previously released videos. You can follow me on Instagram, Ratchet GT40, for the latest photographic updates of the build. So if you do follow me, you will have already seen what's going on the rear arches. In this episode, like I've mentioned, I am going to be making a start on chopping off the old rear arches. There are a few reasons why I am doing that. One of the ones obviously being the new wheels and the new specs. But the reason I made the choice to change the specs is because it turned out the rear arches are, what's a polite way of saying this, not put on very well. So enough of the waffling, let's go. Okay, so let me give you the lowdown on the main reason that I want to chop off these rear arches. Now, I think it was about the 4th or 5th day of me owning the car. I was lowering the ride height, and immediately I noticed that these arches were not put on symmetrically. Measuring from the floor to the top of the arch, there was a big discrepancy. Now, if it's the moulds of the arches, then that's fair enough. You know, that's one thing, but it can be dealt with. If it's poor installation, then obviously that is another thing in itself. Now, let me start off with the driver's side. Got my trusty tape measure. So from the centre of the arch to the floor, that measures 60 centimetres or 600 mil. Let me take you around to the passenger side, and when you put a tape to it, 630 mil. So the driver's side arch is 30 mil lower from side to side. Now, there's no way I could accept that. When I actually come round to doing this work, I may be eating my words because I come into exactly the same issues, but there's no way I could let this pass. So that is basically the main reason why I'm redoing the arches. That is the background on what's going on with the arches. So in order to get the car ready for cutting, I needed to get the ride height set. Now, if you saw the last video, you'll know that it was a little bit all over the shop, and I had explained that the coilovers were maxed out. So the easiest thing for me to do at the moment was to take the dampers off and basically get the car set to there or thereabouts height and just put some wood under the chassis. So it has given me a solid and square ride height to then, measure off and get my rear arches set to when I do cut those off, if you're following along. So I think what I can do now is put my big boy pants on, get the angle grinder out, and see about cutting off those rear arches. So I need to suss out best plan of action and just go for it.
Day 2.
After giving it some consideration, I thought it'd be best not to try and hack the arch off in one go. So that left me with cutting it off in segments, just very carefully making sure I cut just through the skin of the bonded on arch. I basically just worked my way around the whole thing, cutting it off in pieces. Then what I did do, just to remove the last portion of the bonded on arch that I couldn't cut off with the grinder, just going around with a chisel, just levering it off, and because it wasn't bonded on particularly well, it came off really quite nicely actually. And here you can see the rear clam with the old arch removed. No further prep has been done in this photo, literally just the rear arch removed, and this is what I ended up with. So that then allows me to get on with the next stage.
Day 3.
So time beat me yesterday, and I didn't get around to test fitting the rear arches. They needed a small amount of trimming along the very lower edge of the rear clam just to get them sitting correctly. So now I've got them in place, I'm really happy to say that they fit absolutely perfectly. The all-important top of arch to floor dimension is spot on from side to side. So I have no idea what went on with the previous fitting of these arches, but for me, I'm just glad that this whole exercise wasn't a waste of time, money and effort, and I can, I can rest assured that these arches will now be fitted correctly. So I'm really, really pleased about that. So now what I can do is start to modify these rear arches, start making some cuts, start trimming up a few little bits and pieces, which will allow me to suck in the arches slightly to narrow the back end, which, I went into detail about my philosophy on that in the last video. So I'm hoping to bring them in maybe 20 mil or so, but I'll just have to see how it pans out. Let's start making some marks on the rear arches, start cutting some bits off, and let's see if I can actually cinch these in to the rear bodywork at all. So it should be a fun little exercise, and I wonder if it's actually going to work.
Day 4.
So what I've done here is pull together a couple of photos of the driver's side and passenger side, so you can really start to appreciate the difference in what I've done. So you can obviously see on the left hand side, it's pulled in, I would say, getting on for 50 mil, and it's exactly the sort of look that I want to achieve. It wasn't until I did this side-by-side comparison that it really sort of hit home how much I was changing the width of the car. You can see very obviously on the left-hand side the untouched Gulf arch. Comparing that to the right-hand side, you can really get a feel for that 50 mil that I've taken out of the width of the car, and for me that's just going to make everything just flow through from back to front so much nicer. But that's what it is. Modifying is doing what you fancy and creating what you want, and that's what I'm all about, to be honest. Well, that didn't quite go according to plan, as I'm sure you can gauge from the short little clip of video you've just seen. The whole idea was to create a nice little time lapse of me chopping up and fitting the passenger side arch. What I didn't realise was the camera battery was on its way out. But anyway, you'll obviously get the general gist, and you all knew what to expect. Kind of cut, test fit, and so on and so on. So what it means is I can cut to the chase and actually show you what the arch looks like now fitted into place. So here it is, and I'm really pleased to say it absolutely flew together. Now, I know you might think, well, of course it would do. You've done it once before. But what I've certainly found is getting the second side to match the first side is a bit that takes the time. But I'm really pleased in saying that, this came together really nice and quickly. You can see how close the existing sill is to the new tyre. So what I've done is shift the arch forwards, probably getting on 20 mil or so. What that has done in turn is centralise the wheel in the wheel arch, because beforehand it was the arches were slightly cocked backwards, the wheel wasn't central, it was just all a bit of a mess, unfortunately. So how I've got these arches now sat around the wheel is, well, I'm really happy. The all-important wheel arch to floor dimension is absolutely spot on side to side. So the last job of this side that I do need to now get onto is chopping around the back edge of the sill. So I need to cut off the old Golf Arch fillet that was blended into the sill and then fit the new one, which I have here. So this needs a slight bit of modification to match the other side. Nothing drastic. And then I can get that fitted into place.
3 days later.
So jumping around a little bit from side to side of the car, but I wanted to give you a bit of a process of how I went through bonding the arches on. So here you can see the driver's side, and what I have done is carry out a final cut of the rear clam, giving the final profile, which now gives me a 20mm lip for me to bond the new arch on over this sort of width. Now beyond that, to the front and the rear, it's actually a butt joint which I can then lay up some fiberglass on to give me a really nice strong bond. So I needed something to bond the arches on with, so after a lot of research I ended up picking up this bonding paste from East Coast Fiberglass Supplies. Now I know the standard go-to is a 3M product, but by the time I bought the cartridge, bought the cartridge gun and all of that sort of good stuff, it was working out to be extremely expensive. So after a bit of further detail research, like I say, I came across this product that had got fantastic reviews. It is specifically designed for laminating fiberglass panels together, so it fitted the bill absolutely perfectly. Unfortunately, I missed taking a photo of the next stage where I'd applied the thick layer of bonding paste to the rear clam before putting the arch on. So that did happen. And then to secure it in place while it was curing, I just went round with some screws to pull down the arch tightly to the rear clam and then let that dry overnight.
Much later.
Bonding paste screwed into place, allowed to set overnight. Then following that, what I did do is, working from the inside, where the arch butted to the existing inner arch, I then laid up a nice 2-inch wide strip of matting. I think there's 2 or 3 layers along that meeting junction to make that really nice and rigid. So before laying up, I prepped the inner arch, chamfering down the existing fiberglass so it flowed in really nicely to the new arch. So it was a real nice sort of flush meeting junction. I also carried out the same exercise along the front here, although it's more difficult for me to catch on camera, so just take my word for me doing the work necessary on the front edge. Then once all that had dried, I then removed all of the screws and brackets that were holding the arch into place. Again, went through the same exercise of chamfering down the new arch so it ran in really nice and smoothly to the existing. And then once I'd got all of it prepped up, again with the same standing knife scoring to give the glass and resin something really good to bite into, I then laid up 2 layers of chop strand mat around the whole length of the arch. So that has pretty much got the arch completely bonded into place. The only thing I still need to do, and I'll do it when I remove the rear clam for spraying, is prep up the remainder of the existing arch and then just lay up some chop strand around that inside so it's basically laminated the new arch and the existing together. Now the plan for this video was always going to be finishing it up with the arches filled and basically ready for primer, but unfortunately my compressor has gone pop, so while I'm waiting for parts there's no way I'm going to be starting the bodywork using hand tools because I don't want to. I would rather wait the few days it needs for these parts to turn up so I can fix my compressor, so then I can get the DA on it and make short work of something that I would take far longer doing by hand. In the next video, I am going to be getting onto something that I can't wait to start. I'm going to be taking out the existing single circular rear light, and I'm going to be fitting the small twin Lucas indicator and stop lights that were fitted to the pre-1965 Mark 1s. It's a look that I absolutely love, and I think it's just going to really add to that sort of period feel that I'm giving to the car. So I'll be going into a whole load of detail about how I'm going to do that, because no one makes a prefabricated panel for those light cluster fittings. So I'm going to be sussing out how it's best to do it, the alignment of the lights, and a whole load of other stuff. Oh, and that's in between. Hopefully I'll be popping up to Tornado again to pick up some goodies from them. Throughout this whole build, they have come through an absolute treat for me. Mainly the fact that they have so many parts in stock, with the momentum that I want to keep up on this build, has been an absolute lifesaver, to be honest. You know, not having to wait those periods for parts to turn up. But anyway, so yeah, next video, rear lights. So up until that point, I will catch you next time.